Okay, good morning, everybody. We'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. And, Doug, are there any public speakers this morning?
No, sir, there are not.
Okay. Then the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of our April 26, 2010 meeting. A motion, please. And a second, please. Second, please. Thank you. All in favor? Okay. That takes care of that. Doug, would you talk about the work plan, please?
There are no changes to the work plan this month.
All right, and go ahead then with the budgets and budget watch and so forth.
Okay, the first item is budget watch. Overall, again, we had very strong agency results that were offset by not so good subsidy numbers. In the case of the agencies, we had a combination of higher revenues and significantly lower expenses. April passenger and toll revenues were better than budget by 2.1% and 3.4% respectively, for a total net increase of $10 million. This marks the second strong month in a row. Our year-to-date results would be better, but we're still feeling the impact of February, where we had 2 major snowstorms. Operating expenses, continue to come in well below budget, and a lot of that is intentional because of the management of the MTA. For the month, we were down $38 million, or 5.9%. Year-to-date expenses are $120 million favorable, or 4.6%. Some of that's timing. We also have some lower costs that are more rate reflective, like energy and health and welfare. There are vacancy savings, which are intentional on the part of management, and a lot of OTPS underspending also, as agency presidents have issued the directive to only fund absolutely necessary expenses. So overall, agencies are doing a good job of sort of sensing where we are financially overall with our lower subsidies coming in, and this is one of the things we're doing to combat that.
Doug, I'd just like to intercede for a second here. As you all know, that this is the priority of the board, this is the priority of the chairman, to watch the expenses here and to be sure that every nickel that our riders deserve, that they spend, is being spent wisely by the MTA. And I think as you go along, you're going to see more and more savings, not less and less, because there's new things, as you're hearing about, new ideas to save money. For example, the attack on excessive overtime that was announced last week. This is the mantra of this board now, is to be sure that our money is being spent wisely. Being in tough times, we know our riders are having tough times, the state's having tough times. It's our fiduciary responsibility to be sure that money is spent wisely, and that's what you're seeing here in these numbers. And Doug, yes, some things may be timing issues, I agree they are, yes. But I do think that the really overriding thing, the reason we're saving $40 million a month, which is not chicken feed, is because we're really watching what we spend, and that goes for every agency in this place. And I think you're going to see it continue. As a matter of fact, I'll make a prediction it's going to get more, that we're going to save more every month.
Yeah, I think you'll see greater expenses because some of the programs that have been identified, not approved yet,
just
haven't started yet. So we'll see an incremental increase. Some of that, like I said, may be offset with timing,
right.
But overall, I'm thinking you're probably right.
Right. This is some of the things I've been talking about here for years, as you all know, and I think under this chairman now, we are really serious about reorganizing and bringing this place into the 21st century when it comes to managing a very large enterprise. Go ahead,
Right.
Doug.
Okay, I'll keep going. Debt service also, because of lower rates and a little bit of a timing, we're now $35 million favorable year to date. That helps a lot on the expense side. The PMT, for the last couple of months, we've been really comparing that with the new forecast that came out of Albany in January and February, because we know we're well below the budget. For the month, we were basically on target, which is a good thing because we had been running low on that. We're still about $40 million year-to-date unfavorable in that tax. We've had some very early receipts for June already, and they're coming in positive, but that's really, it's too early to speculate on what's going to happen there. The MTA aid, we're down $21 million year-to-date unfavorable, which is 14%. Those are the other taxes that were part of the bailout. talking to the state, they think that the vast majority of that is timing. And in the taxi, they're just slightly under budget. It's with the DMV fees, for whatever reason. Those seem to be coming in lower.
Why was there no aid from this source received in April?
Because that stuff comes in on a quarterly basis. So there was nothing in April. May is, one of those quarters that you would get it. But we happen to know some of the stuff came in June, but we're not going to see it for another 2 months. It's not $20 million, but it's some significant portion of it. Yes, sir.
Their updated forecast for the mobility tax
Yes.
for the year-to-date May 2010. The original budget was 897. Their update is 715.
That sounds about right.
My question is their updated forecast, how does it track going forward?
Well,
from now?
the good news is that when we did what we call the calendarization of that forecast, we looked at monthly seasonality, and most of the big months have already occurred. So, for example, in the month of May, our forecast is 163. In the month of June, it's 95. So, even though we've only had 5 months of actuals, we've actually had more than 5 months if you look at a weighted average in terms of the impact on those taxes for the year. So we expect to see much more modest numbers going forward, and that's what we have in the forecast.
Okay. My question really gets to a point.
Okay.
This updated forecast that they've given us for the 5 months ending in May, going forward, June, July, August, how does that updated forecast compare to our budget? And is our deficit in this payroll mobility tax going to get larger going forward based upon their updated forecast, or is it going to get reduced going forward?
Well, for June, we had a budget of 135, and now we have it at 95. If you look at, I'm looking at a big month, was April, 205, we had adjusted that down to 165.
My June one is the one where we're
so-
still going to be projecting.
But, the
deficits
good news
going
is that
forward.
if it were to come in worse, it would be on a lower set of numbers.
Could I ask a different question? When
Sure.
did our budget is based on the old numbers, not the updated forecast,
Yes,
right?
but
We
we've
never redid a budget based on the updated forecast?
No, we haven't. This is the
Just
one.
got it.
All right, so then,
Where it says adopted budget, that's what we
all
use.
right. I don't know
So-
why we're hiding behind the fact that we're just comparing it to the updated forecast. I'm glad that our forecasts maybe are not as bad, so we're not getting as much less money as we thought we, whatever.
Right.
I mean, we're still based on
Right,
the
so you
adopted
really need to
budget,
look
right?
if you're really looking at versus the budget, you say, okay, we're 120 favorable in expenses plus another 30 on the debt service, but then again, we're way down on the PMT. But we know that we still have a lot more expense savings going forward.
I understand for the last few months we've been saying there will be more expense savings
Yeah.
going forward, but we are down $250 million through the first 5 months based
That's
on
right.
what we thought.
But
on
you
the state
can't
bailout,
see you
which
can't
was which was already down
That's right.
a significant number from what they originally thought it was going to drive.
I think the key here is the $800 million that we've been talking about is the target. The $800 million that we've been talking about that we're trying to hit takes that revised forecast into it. So we've already taken the hit for that in terms of the revised forecast. We're operating as if we had already changed our budget for those reduced revenues. And so when we say we've got an $800 million hole, 400 that we've already addressed, the 400 that we're working on right now, that takes into account the reduced revenues that we're dealing with.
This additional $400 million you're working on.
There are a lot of numbers that are flying around, and it's very complicated. But I would hope that in July, when we have the new,
That's what I was going to say.
I felt last year, quite frankly, that I was watching a 3-card Monte game with your predecessor, and I really hope that we're going to have a format now that is going to very, very clearly delineate what each element is.
But what we all decided was we were going to wait through June, basically. We'd have basically 5 months of really hard numbers, 5 months of projections. Then it's a perfect time for our July meeting. And before the July meeting, meaning June, we're going to start, ironing these things out, Doreen. So it's not a 5-card Monte, like you said. A 3-card, whatever. This is a 5-card. Anyway, we're going to bring it, right. Yes, you are.
Budget. I
Right.
understand you've been working on it the last couple months, and we'll see it all together in July. This is not chunky.
No, but the thing is, though, if you take the expenses that we're saving, Jeff, that is really big numbers. And remember, what Doug said is right. A lot, which you know, a lot of the things that we've approved are just taking effect in the second half of the year, too. So he's got to factor in, when he takes a look at the revised budget in July, he's not only got to look at the state subsidies that are coming in, but you got to look at all the things that this board and the cut committee and everything's approved. As these things start coming in, they're going to have to take both factors and see where it comes together. But we will, to answer your question, by the time July comes, or even before that, we will have this thing buttoned down as best we can.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead. Jim, go ahead.
I'm going to get back to my point. My point is that under the revised forecast, are the deficits that we have projected ourselves through the end of the year, are they going to be increased based upon this updated forecast that may say we're going to get less money than we even thought?
Yeah. What the process will be is we develop the July plan. We will determine whether we need to re-estimate those revenues. So right now, we're operating as if the revenues have that reduction from the revised forecast we got from budget. We'll look at the revenues that are still to be received for the balance of the year, look to see what the experience has been, and if we need to revise them downward or upward, we'll do it for the July financial plan, and it'll be reflected there, and you'll see what our best estimate is for the remaining, receipts.
And the expenses.
And the expenses, exactly.
When did we get this revised forecast from the state?
That was
End of January into early February, we're going back and forth with them.
Just in terms of clarity, I just want to compliment you for this format. I don't know if it's you, Doug, or
No, it was myself,
Bob.
but it was recommended.
It's a much easier way to see this, and we really appreciate
We
it.
appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Mitch,
The only thing I would add, if in July or end of June or whenever, we get the MTA a variety of different taxes, 8, 9, however many you count at the moment, could we get one chart that lists each of the taxes, how much we've taken in, and how much we expected to take in by the end of June, or if we're going to do it for July? Because obviously in these numbers, a number of the taxes are combined.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be better to see each of the individual taxes, assuming the state, somebody has those numbers,
we
and
can
I
get
assume
They
somebody
don't, they don't
does.
share it often, but we can get.
Right,
By then,
because-
we will definitely
Because I'd very
have
much
that.
like to see the sales tax numbers that we get.
Okay.
I'm sure Jeff would like to see the taxing numbers by themselves, not combined with the DMT, the PBT numbers. So each tax that we get, if we could do, I mean, you did it for the mobility tax, which is great. If you could do it for the rest of them together, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
You're
good
welcome.
suggestion. Anything else on Budget Watch, Doug?
Well, the only thing we didn't really talk about was real estate taxes, which also were a little bit unfavorable. They were $8 million below budget for the month, and year-to-date, those are $39 million unfavorable. The good news, it's not really good news, but we are trending upwards in those set of taxes. We were $27 million in March, 30 in April, 36 in May. We were hoping for a rebound. We thought that rebound would have started earlier. We hope that this is the beginning of that rebound, but we don't know yet.
Again, we'll watch it.
Have you talked about the appropriations?
No, we haven't.
Okay.
Yeah. There's one other item is that the state, because of its own fiscal issues, are not releasing certain funds to any of the transportation authorities in New York State. That would include, for us, it's MTOA, State Operating Assistance 18B, and the MTA Aid, which is those new other bailout taxes, which is really primarily a cash flow issue. As soon as their budget is passed, that's when we're going to get those monies, or that's what we're being told.
Be sure.
For the month of May, that's about a $270 million hit for us, that we have the cash flow to get through, but the longer that doesn't happen, of course, that could start to put us in a bit of a situation. So
But we've talked about this, so everybody knows that Bob, you want to just say would you
Sure.
please tell the committee what we talked about this morning and what you're going to do to watch this thing?
I mean, we project our cash flows out, and we take into account when we expect historically to be receiving these monies. We're looking now to see what happens if the budget gets delayed by a month or another month, and we're taking that into account. So
Or it doesn't get done.
Or it doesn't get done. So we'll be looking at the cash flows. We'll see, as our liquidity needs are out there, do we need to take any action? And if the board recalls, you did approve a $700 million revenue anticipation note. We didn't require to sell all of that. We sold 475. If it were necessary, and I don't know if it will be necessary, depending on how late the state budget occurs, but we do have board authorization to do additional cash flow borrowing to tide us over in this period. But again, our expenses running under budget is good. It's helpful on our cash flow. And again, we will be looking at whatever measures we need to take to maintain our liquidity.
Right, but I do think that the committee ought to be aware. I think this is the bigger problem right now from a cash flow projection. What happens to us if we go into July, August, and into September without any of the state aid being paid out, which is a possibility. And I think that we're going to have to watch this very closely because obviously it affects our cash flow. We're down cash flow now over $270 million as of now that we should have gotten from the state.
That's correct.
So that's big money. And we did do the RAN, which was the right thing to have done, thank God, and so we're fine. But we're going to have to look at this again over the summer because this could be a potential cash flow problem to this authority.
We, Budget and Treasury together have been issuing very regular updates of our cash flow, so we're keeping it.
This
very
committee's
close
going to
eye
have
on
to
that.
watch it too, and I know
Yeah.
Bob, as he said, is going to watch it very carefully. Jim?
And in addition, when they do decide the budget, the real question is how much of this money that they're withholding are they going to keep? Because they've done that before too. So consequently, we have to keep our eye on this. Last time I think it was 143 million.
Yes.
How do we know what it's going to be this year?
Yes.
We will watch this very carefully.
Let me ask another question in relation to that, in relation to Bob's issue on cash flow. When do we have to make a decision on the fares for the school kids for September? And does cash flow and lack of a state budget and payment have any effect on that?
I think as we've announced, the decision on what we're going to do with the fares is a June decision, just because of the time it takes
Right.
to get the cards properly set up. So that will be part of our thinking as we go into developing that July plan. So we'll be thinking in July on that.
Because I would assume that having a state budget or not having a state budget, whether they keep any of our money and the other revenue issues will all have an impact upon that decision to be made. Because you can't pay with something you don't have. Notwithstanding the guarantees we got that the money was coming.
Right. But the one thing we're not going to do, Mitch, and we talked about it in our pre-briefing here, is we're not going to get ourselves in a position where we're anywhere as close to having a cash flow problem.
Right.
And Bob knows that.
Okay.
So he will be back to this committee. If we have to, we don't expect to do that now, but if we have to, we do have that RAN borrowing that we can do, and we'll do it.
Okay.
We're just not going to put the place in jeopardy.
Any other questions on Budget Watch? Okay.
Those RANs are issued in anticipation of what revenue?
That's the payroll mobility tax as well as the aid trust account. So it's
Right.
the taxi fee and so forth.
So, I mean, this question of saying that, first, I don't think it's realistic to assume that this timing of payment is something that's driven necessarily by the timing of the state budget adoption. The question is, how much revenue has the state collected, how much cash do they have in hand, and what are they going to do with it? And they're probably going to hand it out for various purposes, I would hope including us, whether or not they have a budget. By adopting a budget, they need a balanced budget, but simply adopting a budget doesn't suddenly give them cash they didn't have before. So this issue of they adopt a budget and what's it going to provide in terms of aid to us is clearly extremely important. I think this idea that somehow we can mind our business and we will remain cash solvent, never mind the state of New York, is not really the note to hit here. We can't mind our business without the state of New York, and the state needs to get its act together. And I don't think you ever want to take the onus off that issue. I mean, just this question, sure, we'll issue RANDs, but it's in anticipation of money that we're dependent on the state to get. So, I mean, there's no way to run this place without the state of New York functioning.
Mark, I think you're absolutely right. That's the point. The state just did tell us that until they had the budget, they were going to withhold. We all understand the reason they're withholding is because it's a cash flow issue on their side as well. And whatever the ultimate revenues are, we'll have to see. But I think all we can do is try to be as cautious and prudent on our own, and also just try to determine what other alternatives do we have that can bridge us temporarily. But you're absolutely right. The real solution is we need aid from the state.
Well, what is clear is that we are not as high a priority as the school districts. It's as simple as that. They're getting paid June 1st. We're not.
We never have been.
Right. And so the question is, if the state has a choice, it has the same amount of money, and who's getting the money? We're not. They are.
Okay. But the fact is, look, this committee, what we're going to do is
Right.
we're going to report back. We're going to watch this thing really closely. Like Mark said, we don't, and Mitch, you said, and Doreen, everybody, we don't control what happens up in Albany. So we have to do what we're going to have to do down here, and we're just going to make sure everybody's aware of it. And we will not allow, I assure you, Bob will not allow this thing to slip so that we're in a problem that we can't resolve or that we can't do something about. We're going to do the best we can, and we'll be right on top of it. That's all we can do here. Doug, anything else?
I have nothing else. Does anyone else have questions?
Okay.
In that case,
Pat, then Finance Watch?
Finance Watch is in your committee book on page Roman numeral -4-1. We just have two items to brief the committee on. The first is related to existing variable rate bonds that are in the market, our Transportation Revenue Bonds 2005E. There's two equal subseries of $125 million each, supported by a letter of credit from Fortis Bank. Fortis Bank has recently gone through a reorganization and is largely owned by BNP Paribas, as well as parts of it owned by the states of Luxembourg and Belgium. They are getting out of the business, and we need to transfer this letter of credit over to BNP Paribas. All aspects of the deal remain as they are now, and so we're just working on that. There'll be a remarketing and a new remarketing circular published in the market dealing with those bonds in the month of June. Secondly, a matter that's coming up before the committee later in the agenda is the authorization to issue $600 million of transportation revenue bonds next month for new money proceeds for existing approved capital programs. And as you can see here, this is just a rotating assignment for Barclays Capital and then Loop Capital as co-senior manager on the transaction, Nixon Peabody as bond counsel. And again, that's just new money.
Two things, Pat. First of all, I'm floored by the 20 basis points for the LOC. I haven't seen LOCs in that amount that low, so I don't know what you did or said, but good job.
Well, again, this goes back to a letter of credit that was put in place some time ago before the market dislocation. So because it's just a substitution of credit one bank for another, we've left all, and the bank has agreed to leave all the terms and conditions as
And
they
they
are.
didn't try to clip you for more money. That's pretty
That's right.
good.
Yeah, thank you.
Secondly, just to comment on the Babs market, with everything that's been going on overseas, there's been a flight to U.S. Treasuries out of the equities market, and that's driven Treasury prices down to levels for the 30-year that have not been seen in quite some time. Right. Unfortunately, it's not clear that when you issue Babs, you're getting the full benefit of that because credit spreads are widening. So it's something that I think we need to watch very, very carefully in June as to when the right time, if we have the latitude, to enter the market with Babs, because it's a very, very tricky, sloppy market.
Understood. Thank you.
Next, we move to headquarter reports and information items. There's one information item, and that's the annual review of MTA pension funds. I believe Kevin McKenna is here from New York City Transit to talk about it.
Good morning. It's easier coming to talk about 2009 than it was 2008. Both you were part of it in 2008. I think I am. For those who don't know, there are two plans involved. One is the MTA plan, and the MTA plan has had an evolution over the last 5 years. It was a small, sleepy plan. The Long Island Railroad was merged into it. The private bus lines were merged into it. It went from about a $700 million fund up to a $2.5 billion fund. Both plans, since about 5 years ago, have gotten away from the traditional 65% equity, 35% fixed income portfolios. It's done deliberately for two reasons. We rode the S&P 500 up and down. The results were good one year, bad the next year. And really the decision was made to shoot for the 8% target that both funds have. We changed consultants about 8 years ago, and this consultant has preached diversity. And what's happened with the diversification is that the risk in the portfolio has gone down substantially from somewhere around a standard deviation of 12.5 down to about 10. So it is a much less risky portfolio. There were some differences in the performance of the two funds. MEPSTO performed just shy of 25% in 2009. The MTA plan was just under 18. And I can tell you what the differences were. One of the differences was that an equity manager that had been with the Long Island Railroad prior to coming into the MTA fold had a very bad year. They performed at a rate of 9% versus the S&P of 27. So that hurt their plan. The contra of that was that the equities on the MEPSTO plan performed at roughly 35%. So they outperformed the S&P. Another difference, and it sounds like a small difference, 3% of the MEPSTO plan is invested in emerging markets. MTA has got nothing invested in emerging markets. The reason it's so important is that emerging markets returned about 80% last year. One of the other things that the two plans did, in 2008, we really had no liquidity in either one of the plans. Just everything dried up, short of selling equity. In the beginning of 2009, we did get some liquidity in, and there was some amazing offers in the credit side of the business. One of the things we went into, both of the portfolios, was bank loans, which yielded 55% to each of the portfolios. Another thing we went into was something called PIMCO Disco. PIMCO is a large investment company out on the West Coast. They basically went into the highest tranche of commercial mortgages, and that earned 35% in 9 months. We're ready to get out of bank loans because bank loans has dropped back down to 4 and 5% yields, and we'll be replacing it with something else that's also opportunistic. Another product we've just added is debtor in possession product. It sounds like it's risky, but the way these guys run the funds, I'll tell you who did it before and why the opportunities are there now. GE Capital did it and AIG did it. And basically what they were earning was like 7 or 8%. They're now out of there. And the new players, which are private equity funds, are looking at targets of 17 and 18%. The secret there is to evaluate what's underlying the company that's in Chapter 11. And if it's good enough, if there's a good enough asset out there that they can seize, plus they're number one on the credit totem pole. So that's just starting. It looks like it's going to be another winner for us. I will tell you that our small cap guys, I think you have to look at 2008 as just a disaster, and 2009 being pretty much a bounce back. I looked at a number for one of our small cap managers, a small cap value manager, and through March 31st, the one-year return is 133%. So, you know, you got to keep rebalancing the accounts. You got to take advantage of opportunities, and I think we've done that this year. Any questions? Jim had fun with us for a while.
What is being, given the fact that the equity markets really have been a roller coaster over the past 3 or 4 weeks, what have been your recommendations lately about how to shift and allocate funds in these accounts?
You really stay the course, otherwise you're market timing. We've got enough diversification in the portfolio that we're riding through it. I looked through yesterday, and at least the MEPSTO plan, which I have a vision at, was flat for the year. So it really hasn't killed us. You know, talking to these managers, and it's difficult because we each have close to 30 managers. They're as much in the dark as we are. So I think the course is don't, you know, jump out of one asset class and into another asset class, because you're generally going to be wrong when you do that. What we may do is we may cut back on the emerging markets, because that looks like it's played its course. And primarily the manager we have concentrated on Brazil, Indonesia, and China, you know, which have turned into the big three.
Not too much in Greek holdings, I assume.
I'm hoping not. But you know, with some of these things, you just don't know. We have some funds in hedge fund of funds, and you know, there have been people who have said, "Why go into hedge fund of funds?" And the answer for us was that the volatility is much less than fixed income, and the return is 300 to 400 basis points above fixed income. So that helped to bring down the volatility of the plan substantially. And you don't know what you're invested in there. You know, it's up to the manager to do the due diligence on that. Okay.
Thanks, Kevin. Next on the agenda are 5 action items. The first is the outside counsel panel addition. Our general counsel, Jim Henley, is available to answer any questions.
Now, what do you need on this? Do you need a motion on this, Doug, or?
Yes, I believe we do. Yes. That's page
15.
section 5, page 1. I'm sorry, section 5, page 15.
Okay. Second, please. And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next, Doug.
Okay, next is the station maintenance billing, and Mike Jaskar is here to talk about that or answer any questions that you may have.
This is the annual station maintenance billing that we issue from the period of April 1, 2009 through March 31st, 2010. On or before June, we basically send that out to the New York City and the counties related to the cost of station maintenance, operation, and use for the 12-month period. The billings, the legislation uses CPIW, which is the regional wage earners and clerical works as per the legislation. Essentially, the CPI was increased to 2.7%. That results in a $3.9 million increase over the year. And essentially, on or before September 1st, we should have the payment of these billings back to the MTA. There are no outstanding billings at this point, and we ask that the committee approve this so we can send it out to the.
Second, please. Okay. Andrew?
I'm just looking at these billings, and some of the suburban counties have far more stations than New York City does. So on what basis are these billed?
These are basically legislated through a update of the law in 1999, and it's basically formalized. I could get you the actual numbers, and
Nassau County has many more stations than New York City. Yet they're
yeah, but
fractions.
it's the size of and cost of those stations. This was based upon a lot of studies that were done, and that established a baseline, and from that baseline you have indexed costs.
Is it ridership? Is it?
No, it's
no,
literally
size
the
of
cost.
the actual cost of the station maintenance.
Yeah, they're in statute.
Maybe that needs to get looked at some point.
Well, every 5 years anyone has the right to look at that agreement and say, this is or isn't fair. But a lot of time and effort.
No, we have,
Yeah.
I'm sure Penn Station and
Yeah.
and Atlantic Terminal
Yes.
and Jamaica are part of this, and that's what's adding to
125th
it.
Street, and exactly,
Yeah,
of course.
GCT.
Yeah,
Yeah.
GCT, of
Right,
course.
so
That's
these
why
are-
it's so
yeah,
large.
Yeah,
If you were to
Yeah.
take those out of the mix, I'm sure it would be very different.
it would.
Yeah,
It would.
okay.
It would.
Thank you.
Sure.
Andrew, just a question. Over many years, the suburban counties objected to the number, and on a number of occasions, the county controllers in a variety of counties would audit the number. Does that continue anymore, or has that issue gone away?
Because of the legislation that took away the cost of those audits and the amount of time it took to do it for those particular counties. It cost them more going through that process than to sign on to the legislation, which basically it formalizes everything.
So as a result of that, nobody objects to the number anymore. They basically can budget their own number
Yes.
beforehand. That's the point I was trying to make.
We actually could send out what the forecast is of those particular numbers.
Right, that's the point I was trying to make.
That's what we did,
Okay.
as a matter of fact, as a matter of course.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a proposal, we have a second, and now we need a vote, please.
Aye.
Okay, send the bills out. Next.
The next three action items, Pat McCoy is here to talk about. The first one is the Financial and Swap Advisors Contract Authorization. That's on Section 5, page 18.
All right, so in the committee book 5-18, we have a staff summary seeking approval to enter into two separate contracts, one for Strategic Financial Advisor and the other for Swap Advisor. This is for our borrowing program and for our outstanding debt portfolio, including swaps. Lamont Financial Services Corporation is being recommended as Strategic Financial Advisor, and Swap Financial is being recommended as Swap Advisor. Our current arrangement is that we have had one advisor on both Strategic Financial Advisory Services and Swap, and that's, of course, been Goldman Sachs. They've been our incumbent provider since 2000, and they have done a good job for us and served us well. What's before you here is the result of a selection process that began last summer. We had 15 proposers in response to that RFP, and we did hold oral interviews in August, and we with a short list of 8 of those firms. I would say that the selection committee determined that due to the changing needs here at the MTA, it would be best to divide the scope of services into the two parts that you see before you, one for Strategic Financial Advisor and one for Swap Advisor. As financial issues took front and center in late 2009 and a permanent replacement for Mr. Laverson was delayed, the conclusion of the RFP was upheld, during which time we asked all of our proposers to continue to honor their original price proposals, and we do appreciate their time and cooperation during the process. Because of the time that elapsed, we did ask for a refreshed pricing from the strongest proposers last month. And we reconvened the committee to look at those refreshed price proposals and determine that to make the recommendations before you today with Lamont and Swap Financial. I would just say that the recommendation of the committee to select a different advisor to Goldman has no connection whatsoever to the existing regulatory and media focus on them at this time. I think our changing advisory needs and the imperative to reduce costs in all areas has led us to this alternative selection. And lastly, I would just say that about 2 weeks ago we became aware that an employee at Lamont was subject to some regulatory investigations, and we have discussed with Lamont that individual not be involved in our account in any way, and Lamont has agreed to that as a matter going forward. And accordingly, the committee is comfortable making this recommendation, and happy to take any questions at this time.
Motion. Jim made a motion. A second, please. And are there any comments by the board members? That's a comment. Go ahead.
The swap market is as dead as a doornail. Nobody's doing swaps. And in our quest to make every dollar count, I question why we are hiring a swap advisor for $4,500 a month. I mean, it would be like somebody offering to give conversational French lessons to my dog. I mean, it's not needed now. I don't know what. Yeah, and now I'll tell you how I feel. It's my fond hope that we're going to get out of the swap business. And I think right now that's being aided and abetted by interest rates and market conditions. If we need someone to give us advice on swaps, could we not do it episodically rather than through a contract? And I note that some people at this firm are being paid $600 an hour, which is mind-blowing in our business. You know, those are not municipal rates.
What we've done is the contract's really broken into kind of two services. One of them is to just monitor the portfolio. We do have to mark the portfolios to market. We have our quarterly financial statements that we're going to do. And I would really be much more comfortable having a third party do that for us, an independent expert in this field, because I believe that protects us and that does those things. I cannot foresee us entering into new derivative transactions right now for the reasons you've articulated and been discussing. However, at some point we are going to probably unwind some of these transactions, at least consider it. And I would like, experts there who can quickly go through the documents, look at them, evaluate the risks that we have, and provide those services. So the rates, we can continue to look at those, but I do think that some of them will not require the people at the highest level. They could require junior people to give us that assistance. But we did want to try to go to an hourly basis for that type of consulting service rather than,
Understood, but if you multiply $4,500 by 3 months for this quarterly review, that's a steep price to pay for someone looking at the screen and telling you what a swap's valued. I think maybe what I'd like you to do is perhaps go back to these folks and talk to them. First of all, I do not advocate that we pay anyone $600 an hour. I think that's just usurious. And secondly, I think we get a proposal from them for what they would charge to do the quarterly valuations, because I agree with you 1,000%, Bob, that it's a good idea to have a third party do that. But at these levels, I'm just not real comfortable.
I understand. I hear you, and we'll have further conversations with Swap Financial.
Thank you.
Okay, but what do you want to do now? You're going to take them as separate?
We could hold off on the Swap Financial.
Could we do that and see what you?
So we'll hold off because
it's not like we're doing anything anytime soon with swap.
So then, just to be clear for everybody, we're only going to approve the Lamont portion of this contract, and we will, as Commissioner Frasca asked, Bob, your staff will go back, talk to them, and you'll bring that back again in the future after you've talked to them.
And Lamont is a great firm and a great choice, and I like their price.
Right. We should. Then, therefore, we have to table the Swap Financial Group contract here. So we are only voting. We are only voting on the Lamont Financial. So may I please now have a motion and a second and a vote, please? Okay. Lamont's hired, and Swap will back to us.
Okay. Thank you. On Roman numeral 5-20 is a staff summary seeking approval of a refunding policy, and together with supplemental resolutions authorizing the refundings from time to time, provided that those refundings meet the requirements of the policy. And if you look at in your committee book on Roman numeral 5-23, the policy is a one-page description of the requirements that would have to be met for a refunding to be undertaken. I guess it's best summarized by saying that net present value savings of 3% need to be achieved for a refunding to be undertaken. And again, we're really talking about a fixed rate to a fixed rate refunding here. and with the specifics of the particular bonds laid out in that table in the middle of the page. This, for what it's worth, this is a very similar policy to what the state of New York uses for its general obligation bond refunding program. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Let's have a motion first, please,
I move it.
and a second. Okay, and are there any comments from any of the board members?
This is a great policy. This enables you, first of all, to have some rules of the road where refundings are concerned, and to jump in and capture savings when market conditions warrant it. So it's a very, very good policy to have.
And
Thank you.
Doreen, thank you for the time you spent. I know this was your, one of your concerns and one of your ideas, and I think it's a good one. I went over it with the fellows before. I think this makes sense. It gives them the flexibility too that they have if they need to move quickly in a market situation, which is good. They don't have to wait for the board approval as long as it's within the guidelines, which is good. And thanks, Doreen, for your help. So a vote, please. Aye. Okay, all in favor, so it's done.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. Doug, I guess you're up. No, I think that's it, right? 2010 new money bond issuance.
There is one more. This is the new money bond issue for June. It's on page Roman numeral 5-70 of the committee book. This is the authorization to issue $600 million of transportation revenue bonds, fixed rate bonds. Structure has not been determined. As noted in the staff summary, it's expected that this would be partially tax exempt and partially taxable Build America bonds. As we get closer to the issuance, we'll evaluate the market conditions at that time to determine the best structure. And again, the proceeds would be used for existing approved capital programs only.
A motion, please,
Moved.
and a second. Thank you. Any comments?
Just a quick question or comment. The last time we sold Build America bonds, what was the spread to Treasuries for the transportation revenue credit? Do you remember what that was?
210 basis point spread.
And are we expecting something around that level too? Has there been any price talk on this yet?
We have not, no.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second. All in favor, please?
Aye.
So done. Patrick, thank you very much. Doug?
Next, we have 4 procurements for headquarters for a grand total of $1,017,027. It's 1 non-competitive and 3 competitive.
Oh. And a second, please? Please, a second. Thank you. And all in favor? Okay, Doug?
Okay, for Metro North, we have 2 competitive joint procurements. They're both multi-agency procurements. First one is Wright Express Financial Services for $100,064,713, and then we have Henry Brothers Electronics for $12,635,000.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
MTA Bus Operations is next. There's 1 non-competitive joint procurement for a grand total of $18,050,000.
Motion, please. And a second. All in favor?
There are no items for bridges and tunnels. For New York City Transit, there's 1 competitive joint procurement involving 3 contracts, and the grand total is $8,850,000.
Motion? And a vote, please. Okay.
Okay. For FIMTAC, we have the approval, this is an action item, the approval of FIMTAC's actuarial loss reserve certification, and Lorene Coyne is here to discuss this.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman Saul and committee members. We're here this afternoon for the 12th annual report to you and the committee on the activities and health of First Mutual Transportation Assurance Company. And there is 1 action item for your approval, which is the actuarial loss certification, which was previously distributed. I'll give you an update on the insurance market. and recent renewals, and then Dwight, Femtac's investment manager, will report on the performance of the investment accounts. The MTA's insurance policies renew at various times throughout the year, and two of our major programs renewed in the past 6 months. Those placements went very well as the market remained stable from the prior year. The excess liability program renewed October 31, 2009. We procured the same limits as expiring with savings of approximately $650,000 or 8% over the prior year. The all-agency property program just renewed on May 1, 2010 with the same terms and conditions as the expiring program. That program renewed at almost an 11% savings. The sabotage and terrorism program, which we renew at the same time on May 1, we renewed this year with some changes to the terms and conditions. This year the coverage was offered to us on an aggregate basis with two sets of limits, and we elected that option. And this option afforded the MTA a savings of 66% over the prior year. Our goal on the property and sabotage and terrorism placement was to obtain premium savings of approximately in the 10% range, and we are pleased to have achieved total program savings of $4 million, or almost 19% over expiring.
So if you take the sum of all these policies that you gave out, how much would you have saved? And this is our yearly number you've been talking about, right? It's for the ensuing year?
Yes, and these are our two biggest programs, our two most expensive programs.
Just so everybody knows, how much was the total savings?
The total savings was $4,650,000, so almost $5 million in premium savings just on these two programs. Yep. This slide depicts the growth of Femtac's assets since 2004. Total assets of Femtac have increased by $53.4 million, or 10% over 2008. This increase has been driven primarily by some additional premiums that were written for the multi-year Builder's Risk insurance program and an intercompany transfer of a letter of credit that we have that secures the paratransit insurance program. Okay, and this is just a breakdown of the assets in each of the Femtac accounts as of 3/31/2010. In the box on the right is a description of each of the accounts and the particular insurance programs that they cover within First Mutual. And if there are no questions, I'll turn it over to Sean Saya from Dwight, and he'll take us through the investment highlights for 2009 and the first quarter of 2010.
Well, good afternoon. It's been about a year since I've had an opportunity to be back here, and as your pension manager had mentioned earlier, a year makes quite a difference. If you roll the clock back to March, end of March of 2009, the portfolio was down about 5%. You roll forward back to today, at the end of March, the consolidated portfolio is up about 15.4%. So what you've seen over that time is certainly nothing new to most of you here. It's just some tremendous spread compression. The flight to treasuries that had happened in 2008 and the first quarter of 2009 abated. People were willing to kind of dip their toes back into risk assets again, and that's really what you've seen is a tremendous kind of boom, if you will, and the demand for anything that other than government debt. Most of the portfolios that we manage here are predominantly fixed income in orientation. The ELF program does have a small allocation to equities, but in general we're looking at probably 92% of all the assets are fixed income assets. So the whole portfolio for the 12 months consolidated ending 3/31 performance is about 15.4%. Certainly from the end of March through today, there's been some volatility in the markets. No surprise anyone in Greece and some of the things happening in the EU have caused, again, a flight to quality. So spreads are wider in corporates and mortgages and so on, and treasuries are doing well. Your portfolios, certainly we've been keeping an eye on what we hold in that portfolio. We did not have any exposure to BP. We do not have any direct exposure to Greece. We did sell 2 positions that we thought were prudent to do on some of the recent events that happened in the Gulf. We owned a bond called, or an issuer by the name of Anadarko. It was a petroleum company that happened to have a partial ownership in the rig that went down in the Gulf. we thought it was prudent to exit that and get out, so we did that as well. So we're mindful of the risks and kind of the contagion issues that can happen across seas and so on. So we're keeping an eye also on the financial holdings we have in the portfolio for any of those entities that have quite a bit of exposure across the pond, if you will. If you turn with me, I think probably the most telling page is actually we go to the third page for a minute in the presentation. If you take a look at what we have here is a snapshot of the portfolio a year ago in March of 2009 versus today. And what you can see primarily is quite a tremendous increase in the market value. So if you compare kind of the market to book ratio, it was down at near 91% a year ago, and it's now back up to about 101. So quite a tremendous increase or rebound in the market value of the portfolio. Book yield has been consistent, relatively steady, despite the fact that yields have been moving in a downward trend over the last year. But it's still about a 440 book yield we have in the portfolio. The market yield is, as you can see from a year ago, commensurate with the increase in price that we've had. The yield has dropped about 200 basis points in the last year. So we've continued to keep the duration of the portfolios constant. They're in aggregate about 3.7 years. The durations are slightly different for each of the different portfolios based on effectively what their liability stream looks like. But in aggregate, we're about where we were a year ago, and we continue to keep the credit quality at AA in the portfolio. The change that we've made from a sector perspective may be a bit difficult to point out, but the yellow band happens to be residential mortgages. We did make a conscious decision during this year to reduce that exposure. It's gone down from about 16% down to 12%. We've modestly increased our CMBS exposure in light of that reduction in the residential side. But really the concern there was that while we were perhaps a bit early in our call here, our expectation was that really that the Fed and the government holds a fair amount of mortgage securities. We expected they would start selling. As soon as they do, that's going to put a fair amount of pressure on spreads in that sector. So we are underweight residential mortgages versus our benchmark. Any questions I can answer at this point?
Thank you. I think it's, obviously a very good performance. You did great on renewing the policies, and I think it's a conservatively run portfolio, and I think from my standpoint, you've done a good job here.
Thank you.
Do we need, Doug, what do we need here? Do we need a motion, or do we not on this? I'm not sure we need it, Jim. Is this advisory, or is this a...
We have to approve their actuarial loss reserve certification.
Yes.
Okay, so does everybody understand then what the motion is? Okay.
Motion made.
A second, please. And a vote, please. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I guess we're all set, right? That's everything. Yeah.
Thanks. Good job. Thank you.
Yeah. At this point, we would turn over the meeting to Jeff, real estate portion of the Finance Committee.
Thanks, Doug. Good afternoon. I have 5 action items for your consideration, including 2 leases at Grand Central. Their terms and conditions are described in the staff summaries. And unless there are any questions, I'd ask for approval.
Motion, please.
Motion made.
And a second, please. Vote, please.
Beyond that, I will say we are working on more and better things. We're looking very comprehensively and systematically at our real estate assets as well as our space utilization. And we expect to be back to you with more on that front. And I'm happy to say that we remain on track to sign up the West Side Yards transaction this month, the next couple of days, as we had anticipated and reported previously.
I've asked, so the committee knows, I've asked Jeff, I mean, the approval of these leases and so forth, things that we have to do by statute, we will do, of course, but I've asked Jeff two things over the coming months, which is in line with Chairman Walder's committee that some of us serve on. Number one, I'd like to get a report, and I think the committee would like to get a report as to the leasable area that we control, what we're doing about it, because obviously we're consolidating a lot of functions. What we need as far as rentable real estate is changing very quickly, and I think this committee should be aware of what's going on, what actions Jeff is taking, and I think this committee, because of its prominence, should be involved in this, and we should be, lending our credence to this. The second thing is we do have these assets that everybody knows about that are scattered all around the metropolitan area. That's the second review, which is ongoing, as Jeff said. I'd asked him to come back to this committee so we can get a handle on what's going on with the real estate, because in line with this cost consciousness and making sure we get every nickel for our riders that we possibly can, wring every nickel out of this operation. Real estate is a major part of expense and assets, and that's what I've asked Jeff to focus on. Since his department now reports to the Finance Committee every month, I think we should change a little bit about where the emphasis is being spent. And if there's any comments, if not, Jeff will be back to us over the coming months, and we'll hear from him. Okay, is that it then? Yeah. Okay, we need a motion to adjourn, please. A second. And a vote, please. Thanks, everybody.